Imagine opening a children's lunchbox, pulling out a small plastic tub of cookies and frosting, and realizing you are holding literal international contraband. Imagine an underground network formed specifically to traffic that children snack across the border, charging real money and stuffing luggage to the brim. Now imagine an entire country's chip aisle being quietly swapped out and erased by an American giant while an entire generation was too young to notice. You have probably watched videos about the nostalgia of the foods you used to eat. But nostalgia is only half the story. The other half is a story of corporate greed, hostile buyouts, and boardroom spreadsheets that actively destroyed the most legendary items on the Canadian menu. When we talk about Canadian food, people immediately point to maple syrup, poutine, or historic recipes like community cookbook pies and lumberjack meals. But the actual breathing food culture of the past 40 years lived right inside the local grocery store and the school cafeteria. For decades, Canadian kids grew up with highly specific, fiercely guarded snacks. But then the buyouts started. Giant multinational companies stepped in, looked at the balance sheets, and started quietly killing off the most beloved foods in the country. They blamed distribution costs, they blamed health trends, or they simply offered absolutely no explanation at all. Today, we are opening the vault on the corporate betrayals that killed Canada's most beloved foods. Listen, before we expose the massive underground cookie smuggling rings and the secret chip cover-ups, hit that subscribe button. I make deep dives into forgotten food history and culinary mysteries every single week. And right now, we are building the biggest archive of lost foods on YouTube. Join the community, and let's get back into it. Let us start with the greatest theft in Canadian snack history, the hostile takeover of the chip aisle. Before the American giant Lay's completely dominated the shelves, Canada had its own king of potato chips, Hostess. Founded in the 1940s, this brand was Canadian to its absolute core. They were culinary pioneers. The original ketchup chip came directly from Hostess. The original all-dressed flavor came from Hostess. The fierce salt and vinegar chip that made your tongue burn came from Hostess. For decades, if you opened a kid's lunch in Ontario or Quebec, the chips inside were in a Hostess bag. Then, in the 1990s, the American corporate giant Frito-Lay bought Hostess. They did not announce a grand change. They quietly killed the brand. The factories kept making the exact same ketchup and all-dressed chips, but they swapped the logo on the bags to Lay's. An entire generation of Canadians grew up on a brand that was completely replaced before they were old enough to realize it. The chips on the shelf today are not Hostess. They are a massive American company wearing the corpse of a Canadian classic. But sometimes corporations do not kill the brand name. Sometimes they keep the name and simply ruin the recipe to save money. In 1932, a French-Canadian couple named Joseph Arcade Vachon and his wife Rosanna ran a small bakery in Sainte-Marie-de-Beauce, Quebec. They invented a remarkable treat, a red velvet cake filled with vanilla cream and entirely dipped in chocolate. They named it after their two sons, Joseph and Louis, calling it the Jos Louis. For 83 years, that specific recipe did not change. It became the original lunchbox staple of every kid in Quebec, exactly the way the Twinkie dominated America. Then the buyout happened. In 2015, Canada Bread bought the Vachon Company. Immediately, the corporate cost-cutting began. The cake physically shrank. The chocolate coating got noticeably thinner. The cream inside tasted fundamentally different. Quebec noticed instantly. Elderly women went on the news telling reporters they could taste the betrayal in the very first bite. Facebook groups launched to demand the original recipe back. The Jos Louis is technically still on the grocery store shelf today, But it is an illusion. The original cake your grandmother packed for you does not exist anymore. The name survived, but the cake did not. Corporate greed also dictates who gets shelf space, and the giant companies do not like to share. In the 1970s and the 1980s, Pop Shop was a Canadian institution. It sold incredible flavors that no other major brand made, like Black Cherry, Lime Ricky, and True Cream Soda. Those drinks came in heavy glass bottles. The business model was brilliant. You bought a case of 24 bottles, returned the empty glass bottles to the store, got money for them, and refilled the case. Every single Canadian household had a Pop Shop case sitting in the garage or under the counter. But in the 1980s, the giant multinational soda companies had enough. They aggressively pushed Pop Shop off the grocery store shelves. The brand collapsed under corporate weight. There was a brief revival attempt in the 2000s, but it did not last. The glass bottles are gone, the cases are gone, and the distinct sound of clinking glass coming up from the basement on a Friday night vanished forever. Sometimes the death of a beloved food is so sudden and so unexplained that it causes nationwide outrage. If you grew up in Canada, you immediately recognize the yellow box, the cherry blossom. It was a massive milk chocolate dome filled with a gooey cherry liquid and a single candied cherry sitting perfectly in the center. Originating in the 1890s, it was made in a factory in Smiths Falls, Ontario. Hershey eventually bought the brand, and for over 130 years, that yellow box sat proudly at the front of every Canadian convenience store checkout. It was a mandatory part of Christmas mornings and grandmother's cookie jars. In 2023, Hershey discontinued it. There was absolutely no warning. There was no explanation given to the public. The yellow box just vanished from shelves across the country. Canadians lost their minds. Online petitions instantly hit tens of thousands of signatures. Desperate people hoarded the last boxes they could find in small-town gas stations and immediately listed them on resale websites for absurd, sky-high prices. A 130-year-old candy was eradicated simply because of a corporate spreadsheet decision made in an office far away from Smiths Falls. When corporations cannot blame the spreadsheet, they blame the geography of the country itself. In the 1990s and the early 2000s, bagel bites were the official after-school snack of Canadian children. They were frozen mini pizzas on bagel rounds that you popped into the toaster oven the second you got off the bus. But in 2021, the brand took to Twitter and bluntly confirmed that bagel bites had been discontinued in Canada. The corporate excuse was maddening. They cited distribution costs in a giant country with low population density, combined with strict bilingual packaging requirements that made every product more expensive to ship. Canadian fans were furious. Massive petitions went up. People actually drove across the international border into America just to buy frozen bagels in bulk. They finally returned to Canadian shelves in 2024, but for 3 years, an entire generation went without the ritual that defined their childhood because printing French on a box was deemed too expensive. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, compares to the black market that formed around Dunkaroos. Launched in 1990, Dunkaroos were the ultimate lunchbox trade currency of every Canadian elementary school. The concept was simple: tiny cookies with a separate tub of frosting on the side. You dunked the cookies, and you were a king in the cafeteria. The American corporate office discontinued Dunkaroos in the United States in 2012, but they kept selling them in Canada until 2018. And this is where the story gets completely unhinged. After Dunkaroos vanished from American shelves, an actual underground smuggling network formed. An internet website called The Smuggler was created specifically to connect desperate Americans with traveling Canadians. Canadians would buy boxes of Dunkaroos at their local grocery store, stuff them into their luggage, and haul them across the border. They charged Americans real money for a cookies and frosting snack. For 4 straight years, Canadian Dunkaroos became literal contraband. In 2020, public pressure finally forced the brand to relaunch in both countries, but in classic corporate fashion, it was not the original. The new frosting tasted significantly thinner, and the cookies were different. Corporate decisions also killed off the quiet, strange snacks that made Canadian summers unique. Take the firecracker popsicle. Wrapped in waxy paper you tore off with your teeth, these red, white, and blue rocket-shaped popsicles were the official taste of every Canadian summer from 1980 to 2005. You handed a quarter to the ice cream truck driver and walked away with cherry, lime, and blue raspberry stacked on a wooden stick. But then the freezer aisle changed. Premium ice cream brands took over, frozen treats got significantly fancier and more expensive, and the firecracker quietly disappeared from Canadian freezers. Or consider Mapo Spread. This was a highly spreadable, aggressively Canadian maple-flavored paste that came in a small jar with a yellow label. It sat on the breakfast tables of Quebec and Ontario households for decades. Mothers bought it in bulk because it was cheap, and kids spread it on toast, pancakes, and graham crackers. But health-conscious shoppers turned away from pure sugar pastes. Distribution dried up, and it slowly faded out of the country. The brand that made millions of kids feel like maple syrup was an afternoon snack just vanished. Then there is the strange corporate ghost of Crystal Pepsi. This was a clear cola launched in 1992 with an incredibly expensive Super Bowl commercial. It tasted almost exactly like regular Pepsi, but looked like Sprite. Sales collapsed, and Pepsi pulled it from shelves by 1994. When Pepsi did a nostalgia relaunch in 2016 and again in 2022, Canadian stores got it first. Nostalgia arrived, but both times it disappeared within months. It became the ghost of the 1990s, coming back just long enough to remind people they miss it before leaving again. Today, Canadians have single, unopened bottles sitting on shelves in their basements. They will never drink them. The bottle is just a memory of a year that does not exist anymore. Finally, some brands are simply swallowed by massive empires that do not care about local history. Thrills gum was launched in the 1940s by a confectionery company in London, Ontario, called OPG. It was lurid purple and aggressively floral. In the kindest description, it tasted exactly like soap. The company knew it, and they embraced it, painting the slogan that read, "It tastes like soap," right on the wrapper. Generations of Canadian children chewed Thrills gum on the school bus, made horrified faces at each other, and then bought another pack the very next day. It was the worst-tasting gum in the country, and somehow the most beloved. But today, the factory that made it for almost 80 years is part of a corporate empire that simply does not care about a strange purple gum from London, Ontario. It is almost impossible to find. Here is the uncomfortable truth about why your favorite foods disappear. It is not because tastes naturally changed. It is not because people stop buying them. Food history vanishes because a corporate spreadsheet says so. Executives, brand managers, and head offices quietly swapped Hostess for Lay's, shrank the Jos Louis cake, and killed the 130-year-old cherry blossom box. They looked at distribution costs, ingredient margins, and bilingual packaging rules, and they made a mathematical decision to kill a cultural touchstone. This matters because the food sitting on a grocery store shelf is not just food. It is the smell of a childhood kitchen. It is the specific sound of a fridge opening at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. It is the exact taste of a Friday afternoon in 1986. When a snack disappears, the snack is actually the smallest thing that disappears. What goes with it is the specific room it was eaten in, the loud school bus seat you sat in while chewing purple gum, the plastic lunchbox it lived in, and the hand that handed it to you. You cannot put a price tag on that, but giant corporations put a price tag on it every single day. And when the margins do not line up, they kill the memory without a second thought. So I want to hear from you down in the comments. Which of these corporate betrayals hits you the hardest? Are you still angry about the death of the cherry blossom box? Or did you participate in the great Dunkaroos smuggling ring? Tell me the discontinued snack that I missed, because right now the comment section of this video is about to become the only place some of these foods still exist. Hit that subscribe button if you love the true stories behind your food. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.